So if you've ever, taken a vitamin C pill during flu season and thought you were building up this like impenetrable biological fortress, um, you're probably in for a rude awakening today. I mean, we really like to think of our bodies as a closed system.
Oh, absolutely.
You eat well, you sleep, you lock the doors, and you just keep the outside world outside.
Right, but if you zoom in close enough, that fortress is actually covered in millions of microscopic doors.
Hmm.
And there are organisms out there that have spent millions of years of evolution doing literally nothing but crafting the perfect custom-made keys to pick those exact locks.
Which is terrifying. But welcome to today's deep dive into the surprisingly fascinating, occasionally skin-crawling, but profoundly important world of parasitology.
Ah.
Today, we're pulling back the curtain on how these organisms operate, breaking down their microscopic battle tactics, and, explaining why they fundamentally shape human history and our biology.
Yeah, and to do that, we first need to draw a boundary around what parasitology actually is, because it's a very specific biological territory. I mean, when people hear the word parasite, they often just think of like any germ that makes you sick.
Right, like a bacteria or a virus.
Exactly. But traditional parasitology leaves bacteria and viruses to their own dedicated disciplines, so bacteriology and virology. Parasitology specifically claims eukaryotic parasites.
Eukaryotic meaning organisms with complex cells, just like ours, right? Like they have a nucleus and all that complicated cellular machinery.
You nailed it. And
Eh.
within that complex eukaryotic world, the field breaks things down into three main tactical divisions.
Yeah,
So first you have the protozoa.
right.
These are single-celled organisms. You can't see them with the naked eye, but they include some real heavy hitters like Plasmodium, which causes malaria, or Giardia, which is this infamous intestinal invader.
Oh, yeah, Giardia is rough. And then I guess you have the ones people usually picture when they hear parasite, right? The helminths, which is really just the fancy scientific term for multicellular worms.
Right, and those come in a few horrific flavors, if you will. You've got nematodes, which are your roundworms. You've got cystodes, better known as tapeworms,
Mm-hmm.
and trematodes, which are the flukes,
Just a whole nightmare dictionary.
pretty much. And finally, the third class is the ectoparasites. Ecto meaning outside. So these are the arthropods living on the surface of a host. Your lice, ticks, mites, and fleas.
And they don't just live there, they do damage, right?
Yeah, they cause direct harm just by feeding on you, but they're also incredibly dangerous because they act as vectors. So they're out there shuttling other microscopic pathogens from host to host.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we often think of parasites as just like bad roommates. They show up uninvited, they crash on your couch and eat all your food. But taxonomically, they are highly specialized evolutionary hijackers.
Yes,
They
exactly.
aren't just crashing on the couch, they're like literally rewiring the electrical grid of your house to suit their own needs.
That's a great way to put it. And that level of specialization, it didn't happen overnight, and neither did our understanding of it. Placing these creatures into neat biological boxes like protozoa and helminths, it makes the science sound very tidy today.
But it wasn't.
Not at all. The reality of how they live, and especially how we first discovered them, is incredibly messy.
Right, because it's basically a story of people staring at things they just couldn't fully comprehend at the time. I mean, we have to go way back to 1681 for this.
Ah, yes, the early microscope days.
Yeah, there was this Dutch lens maker named Antony van Leeuwenhoek. He builds this really rudimentary homemade microscope. And then in a moment of either like pure scientific dedication or just gross curiosity, he decides to examine his own diarrheal stool under the lens.
You really have to imagine the profound shock of that moment. I mean, germ theory wouldn't exist for almost another 200 years.
Wow, 200 years.
Yeah, the idea that invisible living creatures cause disease was completely alien. Yet Van Leeuwenhoek looks through his little lens and he sees these tiny motile organisms swimming around in his own sample.
It's just wild.
He was almost certainly looking at the protozoan Giardia. He was staring directly at a microscopic hijacker and just had absolutely no framework to understand what it was.
But he wasn't entirely alone in looking at these things, though, right? Because a few years before him, in 1668, you have the Italian physician Francesco Redi.
Right, the father of parasitology.
Yeah, that's what he's often called. Because he was the first to systematically describe and illustrate the larger parasites you could actually see without a microscope, so things like ticks, lice, and intestinal worms.
But even with Redi's work, the field remained a bit of a biological curiosity cabinet for a really long time. It didn't explode into a modern, rigorous science until the late 19th century. And the catalyst for that explosion wasn't just, pure scientific
It
curiosity.
was survival.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Military and economic survival.
Because European empires were rapidly expanding during this time.
Right. The discipline essentially crystallized alongside European colonial expansion. Armies, colonial administrators, traders, they were all marching into tropical regions in Africa, Asia, and the Americas, and they were being absolutely decimated by completely unknown diseases.
And they couldn't see what was causing it?
No, there was no visible bacterial cause for a lot of it.
Right.
And they couldn't secure their empires if their soldiers and workers just kept dropping dead from these mysterious fevers and ailments.
So the scientific milestones from that era, they basically read like a desperate race to figure out what was killing everyone. Like in 1851, Theodore Bilharz discovers a blood fluke in Egypt that's causing severe blood and urine disease.
Which was a massive breakthrough.
And then by 1877, Patrick Manson is working in China, and he actually proves that mosquitoes transmit the worm that causes elephantiasis. I mean, think about how wild that must have sounded at the time.
Oh, completely crazy.
Proving an insect flying through the air was acting as a delivery mechanism for a parasitic worm.
It fundamentally shifted how we viewed disease transmission entirely and just kept going. In 1880, Charles Louis Alphonse Leverin spots the Plasmodium parasite in the blood of a malaria patient in Algeria.
Oh, wow.
And then the final puzzle piece for malaria drops a bit later, in 1897, when Ronald Ross dissects the stomach of an Anopheles mosquito in India and proves definitively that mosquitoes are the ones transmitting malaria.
So it's just this cascade of breakthroughs driven by a desperate need to solve a very practical colonial problem.
Exactly.
But, getting back to the biology itself, the way we define what a parasite actually is has evolved just as much as those early microscopes did. Because in school, we learn these very rigid biological boxes.
Right, the classic symbiosis chart.
Yeah. You have mutualism, where both organisms benefit. You have commensalism, where one benefits and the other is just fine. And then parasitism. But wait, doesn't parasitism just mean one benefits and the other gets hurt? It seems like a pretty straightforward line to draw.
Well, if you look at it in a vacuum, sure. But biology doesn't happen in a vacuum, and real organisms don't care about our tidy little boxes.
Fair enough.
Let's look at certain gut bacteria, or even some mild worm infections. If a host is completely healthy, well-nourished, and has a strong immune system, that worm might just sit there and absorb a tiny bit of food, causing absolutely zero measurable harm.
Okay.
Under your definition, that's commensalism. But if a famine hits and that same host suddenly becomes malnourished, the nutrients that worm is stealing suddenly become the difference between life and death. The harm is immense.
Oh, I see.
The organism itself didn't change its behavior at all, but the label shifted from harmless to deadly overnight.
Ah, so the environment dictates the relationship. The context is really what makes it a parasite.
Exactly, which is why modern parasitologists have largely abandoned those rigid boxes in favor of a functional definition rooted in evolutionary ecology. Today, a parasite is basically defined by the math of survival.
The math of survival.
Yeah, it's any organism that increases its own evolutionary fitness, so its ability to survive and reproduce specifically by reducing the fitness of its host.
Okay, so it's a strict economic equation. If I win because you lose, I'm a parasite.
Right, and under that functional definition, you aren't just limited to worms and protozoa anymore. If you apply that ecological math, a cuckoo bird that lays its eggs in another bird's nest to force them to raise its young, that is a parasite.
Right, because it hurts the host bird's fitness.
Exactly. Parasitic plants like mistletoe, which siphon water from trees, they fit the bill too. And some researchers even argue that certain cancers function as parasites because they are basically rogue entities hijacking host resources to survive at the host's expense.
That is a wild way to view a tumor, honestly, just seeing it as an ecological invader.
It really changes your perspective.
But, whether we are talking about a tapeworm or a rogue cell, the real question is how they actually pull this off. Here's where it gets really interesting. How do these microscopic masterminds actually inflict their damage?
Well, the mechanisms of destruction are incredibly diverse. The most straightforward tactic is just direct tissue destruction.
Like physically breaking things down.
Right. Take Entamoeba histolytica, which is the protozoan responsible for amoebic dysentery. It doesn't just passively absorb nutrients, it secretes these pore-forming proteins that literally lyse or dissolve and burst open human cells.
I
That sounds awful.
It uses this brute force chemical attack to just eat a path straight through the intestinal wall, and from there, it can ride the bloodstream to the liver and carve out massive destructive abscesses.
So it's just blowing the doors off the hinges and burning the drywall. But then you have tactics like nutrient theft, which, sounds a lot less violent on paper, but is equally terrifying in practice.
Oh, absolutely.
Take the fish tapeworm, Diphyllobothrium latum. If you eat undercooked, infected freshwater fish, this tiny larva anchors itself in your intestine and just starts growing. And it can reach up to 10 meters long.
Yeah, over 30 feet of worm just folding and coiling inside a human digestive tract.
Which is horrifying. And it isn't dissolving your cells like the amoeba, it's just out competing them. It absorbs your vitamin B12 so aggressively and efficiently that it literally starves your own bone marrow of the vitamins it needs to make red blood cells.
Right, which leads to severe anemia.
Exactly. And then, of course, you have mechanical obstruction, just the sheer physical mass of the invader causing a crisis.
Ascaris lumbricoides is the classic nightmare scenario for that. This is a roundworm that can grow over 30 centimeters long, so about a foot.
A foot-long worm?
Yeah. And in heavy infections, particularly in small children whose intestines are obviously already narrow, a tangled mass of dozens or even hundreds of these worms can act like a biological traffic jam.
Oh, no.
It completely blocks the digestive tract.
Yeah.
Individual worms can even get agitated and migrate into smaller pipes like the bile duct or the appendix, which instantly creates a life-threatening surgical emergency.
So they can dissolve your tissues, steal your food, or literally block the plumbing. But here's the mechanism that absolutely blew my mind when looking at this. Sometimes it's not the parasite directly causing the damage at all.
Right.
Sometimes the parasite just tricks our own body into doing the demolition work for them.
This is perhaps parasitology's most counterintuitive lesson, and it perfectly illustrates the concept of evolutionary hijacking. Let's look at schistosomiasis, which is caused by the blood flukes we mentioned earlier, the ones Theodore Bilharz discovered.
Okay, the blood flukes.
The adult worms themselves don't actually damage the host's tissue. They possess this incredible molecular camouflage. They coat their exterior in the host's own blood proteins, so they are effectively wearing an invisibility cloak.
That's brilliant.
It really is. They can live inside your blood vessels, mating and thriving for years, completely undetected by your immune system.
But wait, so if the adults are invisible and harmless, what causes the horrific liver fibrosis and organ failure associated with the disease?
The eggs. The adult worms lay thousands of eggs, and many of them don't make it out of the body. They just get swept away by the bloodstream and trapped in the liver and other tissues.
Oh, I see.
And while the host's immune system can't see the adults, it definitely sees these trapped eggs. So it goes into absolute overdrive, attacking the eggs and building these massive inflammatory walls around them called granulomas. Over time, it's this relentless hyperactive immune response that destroys the host's own liver.
So it's like, for schistosomiasis, the parasite isn't burning the house down at all. It's just triggering the smoke alarms so relentlessly, day after day, that our own immune system floods the house with water and totally destroys the foundation.
Exactly. The immune system literally becomes the weapon of destruction. And if molecular camouflage wasn't impressive enough, some parasites don't even bother hiding. They just actively change their disguise in plain sight.
Wait, how does that work?
Trypanosoma brucei, the protozoan that causes African sleeping sickness,
Yeah.
is an absolute master of this.
It's like a bank robber who runs out the front door, sees the cops, ducks back inside, throws on a fake mustache and a different jacket, and just walks right past them.
Mechanically, that's exactly what's happening on a cellular level. Trypanosoma is constantly swapping out its surface proteins. You see, the host's immune system takes time to recognize an invader and manufacture specific antibodies to attack it.
Right, it's process.
But by the time your immune system finally deploys the antibodies for, let's call it jacket A, the parasite has already shed it and is wearing jacket B. It stays one permanent, exhausting step ahead of the host's defenses until the host's immune system just essentially burns itself out.
It's just brilliant. But, to pull off that kind of relentless evasion and specialization, you can't just have a simple life cycle. You have to be moving, adapting, and finding new resources constantly. Which brings us to a totally different way of reproducing and spreading.
Right, and this is where we really have to establish the game board. Parasitologists use three key terms to map out these complex life cycles: the definitive host, the intermediate host, and the vector.
Okay, let's break those down.
So, the definitive host is the organism where the parasite actually reaches sexual maturity and reproduces. The intermediate host is more like a temporary incubator, where the parasite undergoes larval development or asexual cloning, and the vector, which is usually an insect, is the vehicle that actively transports the parasite between hosts.
So if we apply that vocabulary to the most famous parasitic disease, malaria, humans aren't even the main event, are we?
Not biologically, no. We are merely the intermediate host.
That's so humbling.
It is. The Plasmodium parasite clones itself asexually in our liver and blood, which obviously makes us very sick, but it doesn't sexually reproduce in us. The Anopheles mosquito is the vector that transmits it, but it's also the definitive host. The actual sexual reproduction of the parasite happens entirely inside the mosquito's gut.
We're just a temporary stepping stone. We're like a microscopic singles bar for parasites to hang out in before getting back to the mosquito.
That's a funny way to put it, but yeah.
Which leads us to one of the most unsettling life cycles in the entire biological world, Toxoplasma gondii.
Oh, yes. This is a protozoan parasite that currently infects roughly 1/3 of the human population. But again, we aren't the target.
No, we aren't. The definitive host for Toxoplasma is the domestic cat. That's the only place it can sexually reproduce. But to get there, it uses rodents as a key intermediate host.
Which presents a pretty huge evolutionary puzzle.
Right, because if you are a microscopic parasite trapped inside a rat, how do you guarantee that your rat gets eaten by a cat so you can finish your life cycle?
You hijack the rat's brain and make it deliver itself.
It's genuine biological mind control. A landmark study back in the year 2000 demonstrated that rodents infected with Toxoplasma gondii fundamentally alter their behavior. They lose their innate evolutionary fear of cat odor.
That is so creepy.
In some cases, they actually become mildly attracted to it. The parasite makes the rat reckless, which drastically increases the probability that it gets hunted and eaten, effectively chauffeuring the parasite right back into the cat's digestive tract.
Okay, I have to push back here for a second because this is where the internet always goes wild. I know exactly where you're going with this.
Right, because if this thing is currently living in the brains of a couple billion humans, and it can literally rewire a mammal's brain to seek out predators, well, aren't we mammals? Why do we assume our brains are entirely immune to being pulled by those same strings? People claim it causes schizophrenia, or makes us take wild risks, or creates crazy cat ladies. Is there really no truth to that?
It's a fantastic question, and you're hitting on a very heated debate within the field. The reason scientists urge extreme caution is the fundamental difference between a rat's neural circuitry and a human's.
Okay.
The behavioral manipulation in rodents is rock-solid, replicated science. But in humans, the data relies on correlational studies. Yes, there are statistical links suggesting populations with high toxoplasma infection rates might have slightly higher rates of risk-taking behavior or elevated risks of schizophrenia. But correlation is not causation. Is the parasite causing the schizophrenia? Or are individuals with schizophrenia perhaps more likely to be exposed to the parasite through environmental factors? We simply don't have definitive causal proof that Toxoplasma is actively pulling our strings.
So it might just be a coincidence.
Right. The effect size in humans, if it exists at all, is likely very subtle compared to the dramatic rewiring of a rat's survival instincts.
I guess the jury's still out, but I'll definitely look at my cat a little differently from now on. Now, this level of manipulation, it ties into a huge foundational misconception about how parasites evolve over time.
Yes, the virulence debate.
Yeah, there's this very comforting old school assumption that a smart parasite will eventually evolve to be harmless. The logic being, if you kill the host you're living in, you die too.
That was the prevailing wisdom for much of the early 20th century. But modern evolutionary parasitology, guided by researchers like Paul Ewald, blew that idea completely out of the water with the trade-off theory.
Okay, what is the trade-off theory?
Well, evolution does not inherently push a parasite to become benign. Evolution only pushes a parasite to optimize its transmission to the next host.
Ah, so it's not about keeping the host comfortable. It's about making sure the parasite spreads as effectively as possible.
Exactly. Let's compare a rhinovirus causing a common cold to the Plasmodium parasite causing malaria. A cold virus needs you to walk around, go to work, and cough on your colleagues to spread.
Right, I'm the vehicle.
Right. So if it immobilizes you in bed, it hits an evolutionary dead end. Therefore, it evolves to be relatively mild. But malaria relies on a mosquito to do the traveling. If you are bedridden, comatose, or even dying, the mosquito can still land on you, drink your blood, and spread the parasite.
Wow, that is dark.
Because the host's mobility isn't required for transmission, Vector-borne parasites, or waterborne ones like cholera, can afford to be incredibly virulent and deadly.
So they aren't evolving toward a peaceful truce at all. They're literally just optimizing their distribution network. So what does this all mean for you and me today? If we are up against brilliant evolutionary masterminds that can evade our immune systems, chemically dissolve our tissues, manipulate behavior, and optimize their own deadliness, how are we supposed to fight back?
Well, the history of human counterattacks is a real mix of spectacular failures and inspiring triumphs. The ultimate cautionary tale is the Global Malaria Eradication Program, which ran from 1955 to 1969.
Okay, what happened there?
The World Health Organization launched a massive, well-funded campaign to wipe out malaria globally. The strategy was basically a chemical carpet bombing. Use the insecticide DDT to kill the mosquito vectors, and use the drug chloroquine to kill the parasite in humans.
I mean, that sounds like a foolproof, two-pronged attack. What went wrong?
They vastly underestimated the speed of evolutionary adaptation. By relying so heavily on just two chemicals, they created massive selective pressure. Within years, the mosquitoes evolved genetic resistance to DDT, and the Plasmodium parasite evolved resistance to chloroquine.
Oh, man.
The entire global program collapsed, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. And the terrifying part is that we are watching this exact dynamic play out again today.
Wait, really?
Yeah, in the greater Mekong subregion in Southeast Asia, we are tracking the rapid emergence of malaria strains that are completely resistant to artemisinin, which is our current most powerful frontline drug. It is a relentless, exhausting arms race.
But it's not all doom and gloom, right? Because when we don't try to out-chemical them and instead try to outthink them, we get stories like the eradication of guinea worm disease.
Dracunculus medinensis. This is a deeply ancient, horrific affliction. It's transmitted when people drink stagnant water contaminated with microscopic water fleas that are carrying the parasite larvae.
And what happens once you drink it?
Inside the human body, the worm grows for about a year, mating and migrating through your connective tissue. The pregnant female, which can be a meter long.
A meter long inside you?
Yes. She eventually travels down to the lower leg or foot, and she secretes an acid to form an agonizing, burning blister on the skin.
And when the host naturally plunges their burning foot into cool water for relief,
The blister ruptures. The worm senses the water, breaches the skin, and expels millions of larvae straight into the drinking source, starting the whole cycle all over again.
that is just diabolical.
Historically, the only way to remove it was to grab the exposed end of the worm and slowly, agonizingly wind it out around a small stick over the course of days or even weeks. Some medical historians actually believe this ancient extraction method is the true origin of the rod of Asclepius, the universal symbol of medicine featuring a snake wrapped around a staff.
That makes total sense. But obviously, winding it on a stick isn't how we fought back on a global scale. In 1986, there were an estimated 3.5 million cases of guinea worm across Africa and Asia. But the approach to fighting it wasn't a new drug or a fancy vaccine, was it?
No, it wasn't. The Carter Center stepped in and realized that if the parasite relies entirely on a specific behavioral loop, drinking unfiltered water, and putting infected wounds back into the water, you can just break the loop.
Just break the cycle.
Exactly. They launched a massive, low-tech behavioral campaign. They distributed cheap water filters, educated remote communities on boiling water, and provided care centers so infected individuals could be treated away from communal water sources.
And the result of that?
From 3.5 million cases to just double digits annually today.
That is incredible.
Guinea worm is poised to become only the second human disease in history to be fully eradicated after smallpox, and the very first to be defeated purely through behavioral change and education without a single pharmaceutical intervention.
It's an unbelievable triumph. But as we successfully push these ancient companions out of our bodies, we're discovering a really weird side effect. Epidemiologists call it the hygiene hypothesis.
Right. As public health improved and helminth infections, all those various worms we just discussed virtually vanished from industrialized nations over the 20th century, doctors noticed a corresponding massive spike in autoimmune and allergic diseases. We're talking about asthma, inflammatory bowel disease, multiple sclerosis, and Crohn's disease.
So the idea being that our immune systems spend millions of years evolving alongside these parasites, right? The worms were constantly trying to dampen and suppress our immune response so they could survive.
Correct.
Now that we've evicted the worms, our immune system is basically a highly trained army with no enemy to fight. So it gets bored, misidentifies the targets, and just starts attacking our own organs.
Exactly. Our biology is so intertwined with these parasites that their sudden absence causes a malfunction. This theory even sparked highly controversial clinical trials, where doctors deliberately infected patients suffering from severe Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis with pig whipworm eggs or human hookworm larvae.
Just hoping the parasites would suppress the hyperactive immune response,
Yes.
giving a patient a parasite to cure their autoimmune disease, did it actually work?
The clinical results have been incredibly mixed, to be honest. Some small, early trials showed remarkable remission rates, but larger, more rigorous placebo-controlled trials often fail to show significant clinical benefit.
So it's not a silver bullet.
No, the therapeutic use of helminths is still highly contested and largely experimental. But whether it becomes a standard treatment or not, it undeniably highlights how fundamentally our immune architecture is shaped by the presence and absence of these organisms.
Wow. All right, as we wrap up this deep dive, there are a few massive misconceptions we really need to leave behind. First, when you hear parasite, stop just picturing worms. We've got single-celled protozoa and tiny arthropods doing massive, complex damage all over the globe.
Absolutely.
Second, they do not have some evolutionary mandate to become harmless. If a mosquito or a contaminated river is doing the traveling for them, a parasite can afford to be as deadly as it wants.
And perhaps most importantly for you listening, parasitic diseases are not just a distant problem confined to poor tropical nations. Toxoplasma, pinworms, and giardia are incredibly common in wealthy, temperate countries.
They're everywhere.
They are. This is why fundamental food safety, so cooking pork thoroughly to avoid tapeworm cysts, being cautious with raw sushi due to Anisakis roundworms, and having pregnant women avoid handling cat litter to prevent toxoplasmosis, all of that remains absolutely vital everywhere.
And this matters right now, today, more than ever.
It does, because the map is actively changing. As global temperatures rise due to climate change, the geographic ranges of vectors like ticks and mosquitoes are expanding rapidly.
So they're moving into new neighborhoods.
Exactly. Vector-borne parasitic diseases are creeping further into temperate zones and higher altitudes where they were previously unable to survive. These are live, shifting ecological threats. And let's not forget, neglected tropical diseases still afflict well over 1 billion people globally today. The evolutionary war is far from over.
Which leaves us with one final provocative thought to mull over, and it goes back to that modern functional definition we talked about earlier. Remember how evolutionary ecologists define a parasite simply as an entity that hijacks host resources to increase its own fitness at the host's expense?
Right, the ecological math.
We noted that some researchers look at certain cancers through this exact lens. If a malignant tumor is acting ecologically just like a tapeworm, stealing nutrients, actively evading immune detection, and thriving at the host's expense, could the future of curing cancer lie not just in traditional oncology, but in studying the brilliant, millions of years old evolutionary battle tactics mapped out by parasitologists?
It's a profound shift in perspective. Sometimes, the only way to defeat an unbeatable enemy is to stop looking at them through the old microscope and start viewing them through an entirely different biological lens.
So the next time you feel perfectly secure inside your physical fortress, just remember, there are master lockpickers out there, constantly evolving, constantly adapting, and they're always looking for a new door. Keep questioning the microscopic world around you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.